I'm Jessica Peresta, host of the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Jerry Kolber. He's co-creator of Atomic Entertainment, and he shares his advice for becoming a podcaster. He shares his hit series, Brain Games and Mysteries About True Histories, and he shares his amazing show, Who Smarted, which brings science and history together to make learning fun. Oh, by the way, it had over 15 million downloads in its first 3 years. Oh, cool. Awesome show. So much to learn and so much to share. This was fun. You're going to learn so much, and you're going to want to go subscribe right now. Thanks for listening. Oh, by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you took time to help out the podcast. And here are a couple ways you could do that. 1, tell a friend and share links. 2, go to my website and leave a review and subscribe. And 3, how about, click on the link on my website homepage where it says, buy me a coffee. And by doing this, you could donate $1 or $2 or $5 or more to help me deal with the costs associated with producing the podcast. What do you think? That'd be so cool. You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
And we'd always wanted to do a podcast for kids. And it was one of those things that's like, when you're in TV production mode, that's like 100 things down the list. And all of a sudden, my business partner, Adam, was like, maybe since we're all just kind of sitting at home and all of our actors and writers are at home, this is a good time to do this podcast for kids. And it's nice because it'll get kids off the screen and it's something educational. So that's how Who Smarted began.
It's the education podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Jerry Kolber is an Emmy-nominated producer who harnesses the power of storytelling and podcasting to educate and inspire. With over 20 million downloads, check that out, 20 million downloads, love that number, across his shows, Jerry has a proven track record of creating engaging, educational content for all ages. His hit series Brain Games on National Geographic and Who Smarted and Mysteries About True Histories podcasts demonstrate his unique ability to make learning fun and accessible. Jerry also shares his expertise with people looking to start their own podcasts, teaching them how to use podcasting as a powerful tool for education and engagement. Jerry is always pushing the boundaries of what is possible to shape the future of learning in the digital age. Our focus today will be his show, Who Smarted. Jerry, thanks so much for being on the show, and say hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, man. It's great to meet you.
Great to meet you, Jerry, and I'm glad that you're here. And let's start with this. You were, I read some stuff in your background there that you were a theater major in college. So what led to the creation of Atomic Entertainment?
So I've always been interested in science and math. And even as a little kid, I was always at the planetarium and the science museum and, building model rockets. But when it came to being in school, in junior high and high school in math and science class, you would not have known that I was into math and science based on my poor performance in class. So not to any fault of my teachers. I had wonderful teachers. Lots of other students were doing well, but I always struggled with classroom learning for some reason. And I went off into the creative fields. I'd always been interested in theater and film and television. And so that's where I went into as my career. And about 12 or 13 years ago now, in 2009, I was offered the opportunity to work with National Geographic to help them develop some new shows. A friend of mine was working there and said, I know the perfect guy who kind of loves science, but also makes, pop culture TV shows. And I was like, there's no way Nat Geo's going to hire me. That to me was like, this like golden, thing that, no, I couldn't even imagine it was a real opportunity, and it turned out it was. And so I really dug in there and decided this was a chance to take everything I knew about making great, fun entertainment and apply it to science and see if I could create a show that's the kind of show that I wish it existed when I was, learning science in high school. And so the result of that show was this series called Brain Games, which became this massive hit for Nat Geo, not just because of the work our team did, but National Geographic also loved the show and supported it and really wanted to see it do well and put a lot of effort behind it. And so that's how Atomic happened, because at that point we're like, oh, okay, we actually, my business partner, Adam Davis, and I were like, okay, this works. We actually figured out how to do entertainment that's also educational, that's also popular. So let's start a company and just do this for the rest of our lives. So that's what we're doing.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And kudos to you, because that's what a neat world to get into. And it's, and by the way, I love the whole idea that, like the science, but we didn't do so hot there, but back then. But you make it so you make it so much fun and interesting now in the show. So kudos on that too. Maybe that's obviously that was one of the big things that was missing. Then was that thing that made you go, yeah, this is all right. So,
yeah,
but.
Well, I think it's interesting if you look at National Geographic obviously has had incredible programming for forever. But I don't think anyone, when you asked anyone prior to maybe 2009 or 10, what do you love about National Geographic? They always would say, I love nature, I love the animals. You almost never heard anyone say it's really fun, right?
Right.
So we were like, well, let's make it fun. And we were fortunate. There was a lot of people at National Geographic Channel who kind of also secretly were like, this could be more fun. And so we really all worked together to do it. But I got to say, man, I have to tell you, I think you're the first person. I've done a ton of podcast interviews in my life. And I honestly think you're the first person I've ever spoken to who's done more episodes than us. So whatever you're doing, congratulations. You're episode 600 or something like this, right?
Yeah. So that's
insane.
I'm getting close to 700 actually, and it's
700. Wow!
I will do 698 went this morning. So and
amazing.
Thank you. This is
so you love doing this, and you love because that's a lot of work.
You got that right, and it's. I remember starting off, and when I had. The first two listeners, and they weren't my family members, by the way. My family enjoys saying that they've never listened once. Thanks. It's like, but
thanks, guys.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but at least your audience is not your family, right?
Right.
So that's
right, exactly. And it's but it's it's funny because it is. I've talked with a lot of friends and colleagues who've tried to start one, and they don't realize how much time and effort go into it. And and I got to say, because one of the things, and I appreciate you saying that, this is it's been a lot of work and effort, and sometimes in the beginning it was the hardest because you start. I mean, I think when you start, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, this is gonna be a great idea, and then you start going, what am I gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
And how am I going to?
And then you're doing all the work, and you're like, I've been doing this for 6 months, and now I have 100 listeners.
Right.
I could go down to the Cheesecake Factory and start talking loudly and get a bigger audience.
Right.
But then it starts to, I'm sure for you start to pick up more listeners. You get to a point where you're like, okay, this is an audience size that we're happy with, and that's the other thing I tell people too. They're like, wow, 20 million downloads and your huge audience. Yeah, but for our show, that's what makes sense. If a show like Who Smarted, which is for kids and families to have fun, if we're not doing big numbers, first of all, we have a lot of costs on the show because we have actors and writers and sound engineer, so we have to have a certain size audience. But then there's other shows, like we're about to launch a show that's literally about podcasting that I think we'll have a fraction of the audience, and we'll be happy because we're reaching the people we want to reach. So I tell everyone, download numbers don't matter, total downloads don't matter. All that matters is, are you reaching the right size audience that you want to reach? And then look at your engagement numbers, right? Are they actually listening?
Right.
And if they're listening, I'm happy.
Very cool. I like that. That's It's awesome. But I do have to say, 20 million downloads. That's, oh my
Okay,
gosh.
that's a lot.
Woo!
That's hard to wrap our head around. Yeah.
That's wow. But I agree with you. I mean, like my first 2 downloads were from Australia. At the time I didn't know anybody in Australia. And I thought that was funny because I don't know.
That's wild.
It is wild. And and over time my audience has grown from Australia and in Canada, and I know where the connection came from in Canada, but in Australia, it's really cool because I've connected with some professors and different teachers and so forth there, and is a big time on my bucket list to go to one day. And but it is an interesting thing as you're growing numbers and you're looking at going where they're from, and especially in the beginning, I do have to come back to what you just said a minute ago. You start going, yeah, okay, so this is a lot of effort and work, and I'm getting crickets.
Yeah.
But it's fun.
But you gotta. That's where we're starting, because we get a lot of people now because of our numbers. We get a lot of people reaching out and saying, I've got this podcast and I've been doing it for 6 months and I haven't seen any growth. And how do I get to your numbers? And I'm like, don't worry about our numbers. Let's talk about your show and what your goals are. And, there's always, just because we've been at, I'm sure you could do this as well at this point, after doing this for hundreds of episodes, you can look at someone else's podcast and pretty quickly say, from the list of 50 potential things that might be going wrong, you can pretty quickly identify what are the top 2 or 3, right? And give someone some good advice and say, try, I don't know, guesting on other people's podcasts, or maybe book some guests on your podcast who have podcasts that have listeners that they're going to promote you. Just little things that seem somewhat obvious if you've been doing it for a while, but you realize, you put yourself back in the headspace of when you started. And I'm like, I hadn't even hear, we were doing the show for 4 months. We were doing Who Smarted before I heard the term promo swap. And I was like, what's a promo swap? And like, okay, I get it now. I understand what that is. But so I try to always put my headspace back there, because we did not, man. We were TV producers. We had no idea what was going on. And we thought, we're like, oh yeah, we make TV. We're going to do podcasts. We were in for a very rude awakening. It is a very different and very wonderful world. So it's fun.
It's so cool. I got to make sure I say this. First of all, I can't wait until your podcast comes out on podcasting. That sounds awesome. So I got to make sure I climb on board when you do that. What, one of the things I read in your bio is that, just like you're alluding to right now, is that you teach people how to podcast. All right, so let's go back to when you first started with the microphones and all that sort of stuff. You got any great stories with equipment or anything like that? Because gear is one of those things that it's kind of like a black hole. It's just you can keep going into.
It really is. Yeah. So when we first started, what happened was that we were getting ready to shoot some more TV shows. We just finished doing a series called Brainchild, which was a 13-episode series for kids like 8 to 12 that we made with Pharrell Williams, the musician and designer, for Netflix. And it's this great series that kids, they learn everything about motivation and science and all this stuff. And so we're getting ready to potentially do another round of that or something similar. And then the pandemic happened, and we were like unable to shoot anything because we couldn't travel, we couldn't be on set with people, like the whole thing, everything just ground to a halt. And we'd always wanted to do a podcast for kids. And it was one of those things, it's like, when you're in TV production mode, that's like 100 things down the list. And all of a sudden my business partner, Adam, was like, maybe since we're all just kind of sitting at home and all of our actors and writers are at home, this is a good time to do this podcast for kids. And it's nice because it'll get kids off the screen and it's something educational. So that's how Who Smarted began. And, but of course we all thought the pandemic was going to be, a few weeks, couple of months or whatever.
Right.
So he was doing voices. He's like, why don't you for now just do the narrator voice? So I was like, all right, I'm not an actor, but I'm happy to play the trusty narrator for the show that we're doing for a few months. And so I started using, my husband is actually a music producer and stuff. And so he had some equipment, and he always recorded in our closet in the bedroom. So I set up my stuff and I go in there to record. And every time I would start to record, it sounded like I was getting like alien alien frequencies. Because if aliens were like also next to me, I was like, and then like, I'm like, what is going on? So he tried to figure it out, and our audio engineer came over and was like, I don't know, like and we found this like one exact spot where the microphone was there, and I stood here. We could record, and we were using like a $40 or $50 microphone. It wasn't anything fancy that I had, and we could never figure it out. And so eventually, 3 or 4 months in, we're like, okay, this pandemic thing is still going. The show is starting to get some listeners, so let's keep it going. So I ended up renting a little office, and I got this. It's like a pop-up audio booth. It's like a little 3 by 3 foot sound blanketed frame. Basically, it was like a few $100, and set that up to record in. Because even we're in New York City, so even when it's quiet and you're inside, it's not quiet. It's like honking sirens. So we set up this little sound booth, and that was set up at like episode probably 40. And that thing's traveled with me to 3 or 4 different locations at this point, and that is still what I recorded now. And I don't get alien sounds. Sounds like I'm in a studio. And we've done, gosh, I don't know, like I think we're at like 500 and something episodes, And so we've kept our equipment minimal. It's a little pop-up sound booth, cool. a nice microphone, a couple of little, the little amplifiers, and that's it.
That's awesome. That's even better to know, because that's, when I first started doing this, I was trying to find, how people did it. I mean, I always wanted to. Yeah. I'm somebody who, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be in radio, and so I, used to record my voice over the top of recording radio shows and stuff like this, and back then, the equipment and stuff like that is so expensive, and you really didn't have the technology, and now it's become very affordable. But what's crazy is that when I first started this, people were trying to sell you all these packages and stuff like this, and I'm like, oh, come on, there's no way I'm going to drop that much money into something that I don't even know if how long I'm going to stick with it. And it's interesting to know, because like some of the biggest disagreements are always about microphones and about whether you should, what type of blanket you should use. Or, I mean, I've heard people tell stories about when, they travel all the time. So they put pillows, they put like a pillow fortress around them and stuff like this. And that's so cool.
That works.
Yeah. It's so cool to know that you use that. So that's awesome. I love that. I have a whole bunch of moving blankets that I can set up that hang from the ceiling from time to time. And people at work look at me like, what in the world? It's like,
that's basically what I recorded. It's a permanent frame with moving blankets.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, I think, it's funny because there was a point too where we were like, well, maybe we should all be in a studio recording together. But because of the pandemic, everyone moved. Like people ended up in, Los Angeles and Colorado and Europe. And so, we've had people reach out and say, gosh, you guys must have so much fun recording Who's Smarter Together. It sounds so fun. I go, I've literally never once in 500 plus episodes have I ever recorded anything with anybody. Like it is it's all recorded remotely. Our audio engineers, Max and Josh. And Josh is also our sound designer and everything. They're just doing an incredible job of like making it feels like we're all together, but we've never recorded live once. I would love to be honest, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
That's wild.
At this point, we're all too comfortable in our little, our own spaces. So
that's so awesome. Because I got to say, would never know it. All right, when I listen, I've been booking it through all kinds of. Once we connected, I started listening to your shows, just starting from the top and from recent and going backwards. And I'd never in a million years would have guessed that you guys weren't in a studio. So
great. I'm glad to hear that. So we're doing it right.
So before we leave this topic, I know you got a podcast coming out that's going to be about it, and you like to share thoughts. What's that thought do you have 1 or 2 thoughts you'd like to share to a brand new podcaster, somebody, just something about getting one started?
Yeah. So the biggest thing I would say to people is almost exactly what we've been talking about is don't get hung up on the tech. Like your microphone on your iPhone or your Android phone is actually good enough to record your first few episodes. Like if you if the thing that's keeping you from starting your podcast, if you've got your good idea, you've got a story to tell or information to share, you come up with a unique way to do that, unique point of view. I always think it's a good idea to map out your first 10 episodes, just to make sure you have, like an idea that has some legs. If you got all that in place, literally just pick up your phone and just start recording, and then use a piece of software like Descript is free or very cheap now. You load your audio, edit it. Don't get hung up on, Lisbon versus Megaphone versus Pod. You just pick one and launch your show. Any mistakes you make can be fixed later. You're not doing brain surgery. You're not repairing a leg. It's a podcast. It's like, so, people get real hung up on it needs to sound perfect and I need the right equipment and and especially I think podcasting does tend to attract people who are either gearheads who like getting lost in the gear or chronic procrastinators who are using perfectionism as a mask for procrastination. And so I say, forget about the gear, forget about perfection, pick up your phone, record a 10-minute episode, post it, send it to your friends, and see what they think. Just start. And you can always go back, and if you want to re-record that episode 6 months from now or take it down because you don't like the quality, fine. But just get some momentum. Prove to yourself that you actually are going to do it, and do it, for 10 or 12 episodes before you even start thinking about gear, right? That's my advice. I think that the gear we have available in our computer microphone or our cell phone, it's fine to start with. Eventually you're going to want a nice microphone, but
That's awesome. I appreciate it. Appreciate you sharing that, because is that land of tech. It can not only make you get lost, but it's like, because then you start having the fear of missing out, or the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, and every one of those things can hit you. And I have met people who are I've met two types in the podcast land, where one is a perfectionist and they're pulling this out, they're pulling that out, they're doing this, they're doing that. And then I've met the other end of the spectrum where they don't do anything like that. And so you hear that, like, they're drinking water, coughing and all kinds of stuff like that. And that's the stuff that drives me nuts. Like, I'm like, nah. Yeah. Although it is fun to leave in a dog or two once in a while when they interrupt.
Yeah, I'm a fan of taking out the dogs in the water myself, but So I do think that there's something to be said, even if you record on your iPhone, there's something to be said for doing a nice edit into script, because the way you edit a podcast, this is like obviously a much deeper conversation we're going to get into right at this moment. But the top headline is, the way you edit a podcast is how you pace. It's how you're pacing the story, and you're pacing the experience, and you're curating the experience for the listener. So there's a lot of nuance there that even I sometimes we'll send episodes to Josh to edit, or we work with a guy named Kelly also who edits one of our other shows, and they send it back, and I'm like, this sounds so much better to me. Like, I sound so much better than I think I actually sound in real life, because the way they've edited and taken out the breaths and just paced it, it just becomes a much more immersive experience. But again, I think that's, get there at episode 15 or 20. Just, it's like I say to people, like, if you're training for a marathon, do you go out on day one, get the best shoes, best shorts, best watch, all the ultra marathoners have, and go out and run 26 miles perfectly? You do not. Right. You get a good pair of running shoes, and you run 3 or 4 miles. So the good pair of running shoes, that's your phone, whatever microphone. And then eventually you can add and add and add. So that's my advice to everyone. Like, people go, what mic do I need? But I'm like, you don't need any mic. I don't need a mic. No, you don't need any mic. You have a phone. You've got one of these. You've got a mic. Just prove to me and yourself that you're actually going to make 10 episodes. Make 10 episodes that are 12 minutes each, publish them, and then let's talk about your microphone.
That's so cool. That's awesome advice, because that literally, I mean, all you got to, if you don't know what we're talking about, those listening and you're thinking about this, just go to YouTube and go, what mic do you like? And then the next thing you know, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, just stop, too much.
Yeah, so it's an overload. But I will. The last thing I'll say is I actually think podcasting is the single greatest medium ever created in history. I love it. I think it's better than TV. It's better than YouTube. I love reading, so maybe it's equivalent with writing. But I just think podcasting is the most incredible way to have a conversation with other people who want to share your experience or learn from you. So portable. You don't have to be looking at anything. You can be listening to it at any time. It creates a really intimate relationship. It allows you to curate your own thoughts in a way that other mediums don't. And most importantly, and I think people don't think about this a lot, is that you own your podcasting content, right? And you own, you say the word RSS feed. Most people listening probably don't know what that means, but you own, you are the distributor of the content. So when you make something for YouTube, YouTube is the distributor. And if you have 10 million viewers on YouTube, and YouTube changes the algorithm or shuts it down or takes your account away, they're gone. That cannot happen with podcasting. Podcasting, you own the podcast, you own the way the podcast is distributed. So it is always yours forever, and nobody can take your listeners away. Nobody can take your feed away. None of that. So I love that about it.
Oh, it is so awesome because the fact that you own that, it's yours, all right, and you can make the changes as it grows and figure out the different things, what needs to, or what changes you might like to make, or whatever you're thinking, because you got hooked up with somebody else who then made some thought, gave you some thoughts. It's so cool because it's like, it's just, I totally agree with you. It's it's such a neat media that, especially because when I first got interested in it, I was a high school principal, and I was with my son. We went to a comic convention, and you got in free if you dressed up like a character. So I was Fred Flintstone. And so awesome. I say that because and my son was Mario, and so we're walking in, and he was in high school age, by the way, and so we're walking in, and at the front of it there were these two guys, and they were having a blast, and they had their microphones, and they were talking to each other, and it was just some local podcast that had or that followed whoever they were following with the comic convention there. They set up outside, and they were just having a good old time talking to each other about this, that, and the other about comics. And I went, that would be really cool to do. And so good stuff. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts about that. I appreciate it, Jerry. And before we move forward into Who Smarted, any commercials or anything you want to do for tell us a little bit more about any of these other shows that you got out there, or what do you think? Sure.
Yeah, the podcast about podcasting is called the Podcast Powerhouse, and that's going to actually be, by the time this episode comes out, it'll be up and running. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you search for the Podcast Powerhouse, you'll find our show that is all about launching and growing your own podcast.
Awesome. Excellent. So I'll put that in the show notes too. When we get to that part, I'll remind everybody about it, and I'll be subscribing too. So I can't wait to go look that up.
I can't wait to hear what you think, actually.
Well, thank you. Looking forward to it. All right. So, one of the things I got to tell you is that Who Smarted is right up my alley, even though its audience is not my age group. All right. And it's, one of the things I tried as a teacher and I kind of preach about now is, wanting to get kids engaged in the subject. And I have lots of, I love puns. All right. And goofy humor and stuff like this. And this is Who Smart is right up my alley. Just the title itself. All right. So where'd the title come from? Because you got to talk about that. Because when I mentioned to different people that I was getting ready to interview you and stuff like this, and I said, and the title of it's, they get this funny little look. And I said, yeah, it probably means exactly what you're thinking. So.
Well, first of all, I'm a kindred soul. I love puns, even if they're for 9-year-olds. I'm into them. So Who Smarted? The title happened like this. So we were doing, like I said, this Netflix series with Pharrell Williams, and Mimi Valdez, his creative partner and creative director. And we were trying to think of the name for it. And so Adam Davis, Adam is my producing partner and good friend for a million years, walks in the office. This is like 2017. And he walks in and he says, I know what we're going to call the show. And I said, great. Say this. What is it? He goes, I can't even say it. It's so perfect. So he says, close your eyes. And I hear him scribbling on the whiteboard. He says, open your eyes. And I see Who Smarted. And I'm like, oh my God, that is amazing. I love it. It's perfect. It's funny. It's the perfect pun, all that. So we share it with Netflix and Pharrell. And Pharrell, who's going to be out, doing interviews and all this, he was like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know if I'm super comfortable with it. But I like it. It's funny. I get it. And then the Netflix team was like, so the Netflix folks were like, they were not as enthusiastic as I was hoping about the title. And then they said, so we actually ran it through because the show was going to be released globally, this Netflix series. So they ran it through all of their global partners' offices. And they said, we can't use it because because the pun works in English, but it doesn't translate cleanly into any other language as the pun, right? So it becomes like they started listing all the different things, like just didn't make sense.
Right.
And so we said, okay. And then Pharrell was like, this show's about kids. It's about empowering them to be smarter and braver. Why don't we call it Brainchild? Okay. So we called the Netflix series Brainchild. Nice. Great. So Brainchild is out on Netflix. Then, when in 2020, when we started talking about this series, Adam said, remember that title we had that we didn't use for Brainchild? Maybe this is the time to use it. And I was like, oh yeah, this is it for sure. Nobody can tell us no. It doesn't have to translate into, we don't have to worry about how it translates. And so that's how it happened. So it was a title that we almost used for a Netflix series that got the thumbs down. So.
Well, I'm glad you didn't throw it away because it's an awesome title.
Me too.
And
Me too.
It encourages the use. Then there's smarty pants, and you got all kinds of uses, and it really makes sense. As all you got to do is listen to one episode, and you go, "Yep, I get it." All right, and this is pretty, and this is really cool. Connects and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Nice story though. That's I do want you to know that whenever I share the title with someone, it brings a smile or a smirk, and they go, "Say that again."
Did you say smarted?
Yes.
Who smarted? Yeah.
I love it.
I love it. Yeah, we've got, the kids love being, all of our, the kids who are fans are all smarty pants, and the families are smarty families. So smarty parents. So it's, yeah.
Love it. It's awesome. Thanks for telling that. All right. So now we got science and history. Okay. This is cool. I'm a former history teacher and, multiple degrees in history and stuff like this. And it's always fun when it's made fun. All right. Because there's so much stuff there. And, I gotta, you shared some of it with me, already about, how you make them, which is, by the way, wild that you guys aren't even in the same place. But some of my episodes that I love, which came first, lemonade or iced tea, which that's a really cool sort of disagreement thing happening there, and the characters talking about where how far back it goes and all this sort of stuff. And I just love the kind of comments between the characters. And then another one of my favorites is the slang words, which is you want to talk about an interesting history. That's all you got to do is look at slang. Yeah. And I really love the hot dog one, especially because some of your characters and some of your voices, they're so good at, you think they're right, however you envision them, you see the facial expression when something is said. It's like another one of my favorites has to do with the, I think the title is something like why is the body so disgusting or something like this, and the characters having to sign an agreement about not being too disgusted or something. I forget what. And it's but the comments that are being made, it's like I can see those facial expressions right now, right now. All right, so where do these ideas come from? I mean, I mean, because you got they're all over the place. I mean, you have ones that fit with the Olympics right now, and you got other stuff. And so,
Yeah. So initially it was myself and Adam and 2 or 3 other writers that we worked with a lot. We're coming up with all the ideas and writing the scripts. And then once we realized that wasn't going to work, if this was going to be more than a few months, doing 3 episodes a week, we brought in more writers. And at this point we have a stable of probably 7 or 8 writers who are always with us, and new people coming in and out, and they come up with the ideas, man. They're always like, it's amazing how often you think people would come up with ideas that we've already done all the time, but people really just come up with new stuff all the time. And so the writers come up with these ideas, and then they start thinking about, what are the things in this idea, this history or science that can start talking and come to life, and what's a fun way for the narrator to go on a journey with them. And we time travel, we travel through spaces, and it's a very it's a pretty open field for playing for the writers. Like there's almost nothing that we wouldn't do, so they just have a lot of fun with it, and they're the writers on this show they're idea factories. So
that's so cool, and it works so well. I mean, there's just so many topics that I can't wait to go back in and listen to different ones, and I've enjoyed all the ones I've been listening to. Like I said, I've been started from the most recent and going backwards and having a blast. And then because I scroll through the titles, I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to this one now. And so, that type of thing. And which, by the way, is the thing I love about podcasting too. And
right,
because you can do stuff like this. Yeah. So I gotta make sure I mention this, because you have these, and you've explained some of this, that they're not together, but you have these great voices and sound effects. I mean, because it just adds to it. And like I said, I feel like when I'm listening to them, I'm like, wow, I see their facial expressions, or the oh my goodness, or something like this that's happening. It really makes the listener escape into the world, is my point. And I think that is so cool. Could you talk about your uses of the voices and sound effects? Yeah. I mean, obviously you've got some sound engineers and you've got some actors and stuff like this, but let's go into that world a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So from the very beginning, Adam and I decided we wanted to think of this not just as a podcast. Because typically when you say podcast, you're thinking of people talking, or someone talking alone, or doing an interview. And we were like, let's make this like basically feel like you're watching a TV show, but the TV's on in the next room, right? So that level of production value and world immersion, we thought was going to be very important to getting the kids to come along for the ride. Because there's a handful of other big podcasts for kids and families. Some of them are immersive like this. Some of them are a little more, kind of lecture-y style. We just wanted to do something that was like super, super immersive. And so that meant thinking about unique sound design for every episode. So if we're in Greece, the sound design should sound like Greece. If we travel to another time in Greece, then the sound design should change. There should be voices that match. There should be language and accents that match. And then also the idea of bringing the whole world to life. So, as you said, like we're talking about hot dogs and sausages. We're not talking about hot dogs and sausages. We're talking with the hot dog. The hot dog's talking to us. The sausage is talking to us, right? So it's like, if we're doing an episode on Galileo's coming on the show, right? And his telescope might also talk, right? So it's become kind of a running joke at this point, where when things start talking, the trusty narrator is like, of course the pencil's talking, because this is who's smarted and everything on this show talks. So all of that is just a deliberate way to create a real world immersion. And then our sound designers have just done, Josh has done an incredible job of just making you really feel like you're in this sort of soundscape. And then the voice actors are all amazing. I mean, many of them are professional voice actors. Some of them are professional, TV actors. And so they bring to the voice that quality you're talking about, which is like they're trying to like do a voice that makes you, the adults and the kids, see the character in their head. So all of these things just work together really well. And we're just very lucky to have attracted an amazing team of people that, kind of share our vision for what the show should be.
It's so cool because you really have. I got to say this, like in the hot dog one, I'm pretty sure that, and I don't mean this in reality, but I'm pretty sure that the one voice is one of my grandfather's friends that I used to hang out with my grandfather, who was talking about his hot dog. It just sound. I mean,
right. It sounded really familiar.
Yes, it's like, oh my gosh, man, that was a. Just cool. And I don't mean like I know the guy. I mean, but the voice just fits with as they're talking about the Coney Island ducks and they're talking about it's like, nice. I love it. I think you've really found a great combination of way you make things work here. So
thanks.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. So, we're starting to get close to finishing up. And one of the things I got to make sure is that, you talk about, encouraging teachers and encouraging those listening about different aspects of being a subscriber to Who's Smarted. Well, one of the things is you have Who's Smarted Plus. Can you talk a little bit about the difference and some of the benefits that when you sign up for Who's Smarted Plus?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, obviously, this is it's a somewhat expensive show to produce. We actually just spent a lot of money on it for the first few years, and we're like, oh, it's like, we're loving doing it. It's impactful, but it got to a point where we're like, all right, the show has to start at least paying for itself, to keep going. And so really, there's two ways that you can pay for a podcast. You either have ads on the show that people listen to, which we do, or for people who don't want to listen to ads for whatever reason, they can pay for a subscription. And so we have a Who's Smarted Plus subscription that's a few bucks a month. That is it gives you all the episodes ad free, and it also gives you a bonus content where we have special episodes where we answer questions from our subscribers, and you also get like one extra new episode every week if you're a subscriber. So all of those are the benefits, and we have several thousand families that do that. We actually even have one called Super Smarty Fan. That's a bit more expensive, but your kid actually gets to be on the show. Nice. And so we've actually had quite a few of those, and those have been very, very fun to do with our Smarty families that wanted to do that. But the real reason we started this was this wasn't started to make money. This was started to have impact and provide value for families. And we hadn't realized when we started how useful it would be for teachers as well as a lot of homeschool families who use the show for transition time, or they'll use an episode to get kids excited about a topic before they get into the meat of the curriculum. And one of the things we've heard from classroom educators is that, it's obviously better for them if the show is ad free, that they're, it's, even though our ads are kid friendly, it's not the best for ideally you're not playing ads in the classroom. And so we actually have this is a question for you. So we a couple of months ago, we decided, let's just give away Who's Smarted Plus to any classroom educator for free forever. Right. So nice. We know it's already hard enough being a teacher. You're already like strapped for time. We know so many teachers who tell us they have to like buy resources for their classroom now. So we're like, let's not be another thing they have to pay for. Let's give the ad-free version to educators for free, which they can do just by going to whosmarted.com and clicking on educators, enter their school email address, and within minutes they will have a free subscription to use the show in their classroom. And that's actually, it's been a nice way to get back to the teachers for sure. My question for you is, what is the best way to get more teachers aware of this? Because we don't really, we have the teachers who already listen to the show who are appreciating it. But is there a way to make more educators and administrators aware that there's this resource they can use, that it's ad-free podcast that can be used in the classroom? Is there anything you'd suggest?
Well, that's an interesting.
Besides being on your show, obviously.
Thanks, appreciate it. And I think what you're doing, trying to go to the places where they might be listening and so forth. Because like one of the things that's cool is like on your website for Who's Smarted, you have a couple of teachers there who are doing funny little exciting dances or excited about being able to have access to it and what it's done for them. I think some of the most important ways is to literally try and reach out, to find those those schools that where you can they have some sort of an online presence where you try and do a hey, look at us. we're here to help you do what you do, and it doesn't. This is not. We're not trying to nickel and dime you or anything like that. This is to try and help you be part of a really cool thing. I just think that's one of them. I think because there's a lot of educators who are podcasters. Like I belong to two that are just have podcasters who are educators, and it's I think that's probably a good market to talk to, because especially because that's your world. And then if you find those ones that are especially the ones that are either they're currently teachers or they used to be teachers and now they're doing something associated with helping teachers do stuff, I think that's important. But I just think trying to go to those places where then you market towards those areas. Like I have a whole bunch of educators who listen to me from New York, New Jersey area. Well, that's because of this one program that I belong to called the Education Podcast Network. And they because I live in Georgia, I'm not, once in a while I go up there, but sorry, that's I'm a big baseball fan, and that's the land of these other two teams that
You can't say my name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially this season. Anyway, but just kidding for all my listeners who are out there. But with that being said, I think really trying to go into those types of the places where they're listening or they're talking, or even targeting some, I should probably, that's not a good word, but, identifying some, school systems where they have an online presence, where the school itself does, whether it's because they do their own podcasting, or they do a lot of social media presence with the, kids doing types of daily shows and stuff like this. And so you're reaching out to those adults that are in those schools. And I think that is probably a helpful thing. Another one is that every state has organizations that are geared towards teachers or the principals working in school settings. For example, in the state of Georgia, we have an organization called PAGE, which is a professional association of Georgia educators, and incredible number of teachers belong to that, as well as administrators and so forth. There's an organization called GALE, which is stands for Georgia Association of Educational Leaders. And so lots of principals, superintendents, and those are other types of places, because, you have lots and lots of them there. And so being able to talk maybe, or do something for, where you present at them. And then, there's any number of things. Like I was a history teacher. There's a state and national association for history teachers, social studies teachers, and science the same way. And I think some of those organizations are probably a good way of getting, because you get somebody's attention about it, then they share it. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
that's a great idea. The professional organizations is a great idea. We should do an episode on, maybe we should do a Who Smarted episode on how social studies became social studies.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That'd be interesting.
That would be very interesting.
I love that idea of going to professional organizations. Thank you. That's helpful.
Well, because that's a big part of every state with educators, is because that's their network then, and their professional network, and they go to those events. We're coming to the end. That's a joke. Almost all my schools in the state of Georgia started August 1st, or right therein. So, but but my point is that they all have these different meetings throughout the year, and they have websites, and they share information. And I think the professional organizations is probably one of the best ways to go.
Cool.
But
awesome.
Cool. Thanks for asking me the question.
Thanks. Yeah. And thank you for the help. And
you're welcome. Yeah. I'm going to share that information out there. But by the way, I could just as a note, you got to have some character say, as a former history teacher, there's just so many cool things But one of the worst things ever is that the kids come pre-programmed with this question: do we have to know dates?
Do we have to know dates?
Yes, that's like the first question they ask you out of their out. Yeah, it's like, oh, come on, guys. My favorite group to teach are 10th graders, right? But they come pre-programmed with, do we need to know dates? It's like
dates.
And
you might have to know a few dates.
Yes, at least a time frame, man. What is that's but they come with the idea that it's all going to be boring because you're going to make them memorize all this stuff, and it's like, so anyway, just food for thought if you ever go into that land. Maybe the book says, because of course the book has to talk. Or something. Anyway, sorry, I was trying to imitate you. Anyway, love it. So thanks for asking that question. So as we're wrapping up here, Jerry, where can our listeners find more information, connect, and learn more?
You can just go to whosmarted.com, and everything about the show is there. For the free subscription, the ad-free version for educators, the button is right there. It just says educators. Lots of information about the show, testimonials from other teachers are there. So that's the best spot. And then our series, Mysteries About True Histories, which is a narrative podcast that's teaching kids about history and logic, is also on all the podcast platforms. So that's just search for Mysteries About True Histories for that, and whosmarted.com for whosmarted.
Awesome. This has been too much fun. I got two last questions to ask you, and these are questions I like to ask my guests. And the first one is, when everything's happening and you might want to give up, how do you keep pressing forward?
I don't think I ever want to give up. I don't know. That's a good question. I think my brain just does it quickly. Maybe there's times when I so quickly I'm like, this is too much, but I just am always so excited about what we're doing. I just love doing entertainment. I love doing education. I love that we've made this lane for our company that we are kind of the best at doing it. And so for me, like the impact, if I ever start feeling down or like all I have to do is go look at the comments on Who Smarted on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or look at any of the emails we're getting from parents and families and kids. And it's like, you can't look at two of them without being like, all right, we got like, whatever's bothering me, it doesn't matter, because the impact we're having is so worth it. So I think for me, it's just always, it's seeing that we're having impact in the world, keeps me just totally motivated all the time.
That's excellent. Love it. And I can imagine how inspiring that would be to read some of that and to just say, I'm good now. We're good. So good stuff. Last question. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
Sure. I would say there's actually quite a few. I'm going to pick one. I'm going to say Mr. Warren, who was my English teacher in 11th grade, I think. He actually had us study the White Album, the Beatles' White Album, and use that as a springboard into understanding poetry and writing. And then he had us study Iggy Pop. Nice. It was like, nice. he was able to relate all of this like classic rock to like studying English literature, and then like sort of segued that into like assigning us to each like reach out to like living poets and interviewing them. So not only was it really like the first time I was like, oh, this is fun. Like English is actually fun. Even though I already loved reading, but like English class had never been fun before. So it was fun. So it was the first time I really connected like classroom education and fun. And also connecting like pop culture and like, classic literature and modern poetry was just a really interesting way to get us all very excited about learning. So Mr. Warren.
Very cool.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what a neat teacher. That would be awesome. Jerry, thank you so much for talking with us about Who Smarted, Atomic Entertainment, and your world. Oh, this is too cool. What an incredibly cool, interesting way to make learning fun. I love it. Wishing you the best in all you do.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate you having me on. Great to meet you.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.